Today, there is growing anxiety on the right over the results of a Texas special election that the Wall Street Journal editorial board summed up like this. How does a Republican lose by 14 points in a safe, conservative Texas state Senate seat that President Trump carried by 17 points in 2024? Answer: when there's a voter backlash against the Trump administration, notably its mass deportation debacles. Here's the victor, Democratic Taylor Rayne, a union leader and first-time candidate, talking to MS Now's Joe Scarborough about how he won big in that deep red district.
And a place like Fort Worth, Texas, when you knocked on doors, had people that had voted Republican their whole life decide to vote for you.
To me, it was simple. We had to focus on solutions, not partisan politics, bringing communities together.
Hello and welcome, guys. Adam is here. Stop whatever you're doing right now and listen, because what just happened in Texas is the kind of political earthquake that comes along once in a generation. The ground didn't just shift under Donald Trump's feet. It completely opened up and swallowed whatever was left of his invincibility aura. Democrats just flipped a deep red Texas state Senate seat.
And as you point out, Democrats picked up a stunning victory in a special election runoff for a Texas Senate seat. Taylor Rayne flipped the solidly red Senate District 9, which represents Fort Worth and surrounding suburbs, defeating Republican Lee Wambsgans by 14 points. President Trump won this district by 17 points back in 2024. This is in part of Tarrant County, where no Democrat has won a state Senate seat since 1978.
Read that sentence again. Let it sink in. In one of the most reliably Republican districts in the entire state, a district Donald Trump personally won by 17 points in the 2024 presidential election, a Democrat just won by 14 points. Do the math on that. That's a 30-point swing toward Democrats in a place Republicans have controlled for decades without ever breaking a sweat.
When asked yesterday about the race last night, President Trump claimed he didn't know anything about it. But as you can see here, he had posted in support of Wambsgans 3 separate times on social media in the 2 days leading up to the Saturday election. Florida's Republican Governor Ron DeSantis wrote on social media that special elections are quirky and not necessarily projectable, but he acknowledged that a swing of this magnitude is not something that can be dismissed.
30 points in Texas, in a Fort Worth suburban district that was supposed to be as safe gets for the Republican Party anywhere in America. And here's where this goes from bad to absolutely catastrophic for Trump. The Republican who lost this race wasn't some random unknown candidate who ran a terrible campaign with no resources. This was a candidate Donald Trump personally endorsed by name. He called her a true MAGA warrior in official statements. He fired off multiple messages to his massive Texas supporter base in the final days, specifically urging them to vote for her. He put his personal brand, his political reputation, his entire aura of inevitability directly on the line for this race. And despite all of that, despite the full weight of a presidential endorsement and the entire MAGA messaging machine behind her, she got absolutely demolished by 14 points. The winner is a man named Taylor Rayne, a working-class union leader and first-time political candidate that most people outside Fort Worth had never heard of before this special election started. He walked into what was supposed to be an impenetrable Republican fortress, a district where Democrats had been losing by huge margins for as long as anyone can remember, and he won 57% of the vote to the Republicans' 43%. That's not a narrow squeaker. That's not a fluke you can explain away with weird turnout patterns or unusual local dynamics. That's a full-blown demolition job in a district Trump dominated just 2 years ago. The reactions pouring in from both sides tell you everything about how significant this is. On the Democratic side, the DNC is absolutely euphoric. DNC Chair Ken Martin came out and said, "In a Trump plus 17 district, Republicans had to go all out with everything they had, and they still lost by double digits. Tonight's results prove that no Republican seat anywhere is safe heading into 2026. On the Republican side, the response has been a jarring mix of panic and finger-pointing. Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, one of the most powerful Republican officials in the state, called this result a wake-up call for Republicans everywhere. He said, "Republicans cannot take anything for granted anymore in any race, in any district." The losing candidate herself admitted honestly that Democratic voters were highly motivated, while far too many Republican voters simply chose to stay home rather than come out and vote. But the most revealing reaction came from Donald Trump himself. When he endorsed this candidate, he clearly expected a comfortable victory he could claim credit for and use as proof that MAGA is still unstoppable. But when she lost, and not just lost, got blown out by 14 points, Trump immediately tried to run away from the whole thing as fast as possible. He told reporters with a straight face that he wasn't really involved in the race. He dismissed it as just a local Texas thing that had nothing to do with him. He actually said, and I love this quote, "I'm not on the ballot. You don't know whether or not it's transferable." Are you kidding me? This is the same man who personally endorsed the candidate by name, called her a MAGA warrior, sent multiple messages telling millions of supporters to vote for her. And now that she lost by 14 points in a district he won by 17, he wants everyone to believe he had nothing to do with it? Nobody is buying that. Not the Democrats who just won a historic upset. Not the Republicans who are now openly panicking about 2026. And certainly not the political analysts connecting this result to a much larger and more troubling pattern for Trump and his party. Let's get into why this matters so enormously beyond just one special election. Texas Senate District 9 covers a significant chunk of the Fort Worth metropolitan area in Tarrant County. This is suburban Texas, upper-middle-class neighborhoods, the kind of territory Republicans have dominated by huge margins for decades without ever worrying about serious Democratic competition. The seat had been held by Republicans for as long as anyone can remember. The previous incumbent didn't lose. He voluntarily resigned to take another position, which triggered this special election. From the Republican perspective, this was supposed to be a completely routine hold, a formality. Nobody on either side genuinely expected Democrats to have any realistic chance. The Republican candidate had everything going for her. She was a well-known conservative activist with strong MAGA ties. She had Trump's personal endorsement. She had the full organizational and financial backing of the Texas Republican establishment. She had name recognition, professional infrastructure, significant fundraising, and the president personally telling millions of people to vote for her. And with all of that behind her, every possible structural advantage you could ask for in a deep red Texas district, she still lost by 14 points to a first-time Democratic candidate most people in the district had barely heard of 6 months earlier. Sit with that result for a moment. This wasn't a loss by a point or two in a fluky low-turnout special election where you can cherry-pick unusual local factors to explain it away. She lost by 14 points in a district Trump carried by 17. That's a net partisan swing of 30 points toward Democrats in a single race. To put that in perspective, if you applied a uniform 30-point swing toward Democrats across the entire national map in the 2026 midterms, Democrats would win the single largest congressional landslide in modern American history, and it wouldn't even be close. Now, obviously, you can't just take one special election and mechanically extrapolate it across the entire country. Special elections have unique dynamics, but here's what should terrify every Republican strategist paying attention. This Texas race is not the only special election where Democrats have dramatically overperformed recently. Democrats have been consistently outrunning their expected partisan baselines in special elections throughout Trump's entire second term. Race after race after race, the pattern is the same. Democratic candidates running significantly ahead of where the fundamental numbers say they should be, while Republican candidates underperform. So what's driving this? Two factors, operating simultaneously and reinforcing each other. First, Democratic voters across the country are extremely energized right now at levels remarkable for an off-cycle period. They're angry about what they see happening with the Trump administration, the court battles, the executive overreach, the chaos, the constitutional conflicts. All of it is acting as a massive motivational engine driving Democratic turnout far above normal expectations. Second, and this is the part that should keep Republican strategists awake at night, MAGA voters are not showing up the way they used to. The enthusiasm gap that used to reliably favor Trump has completely flipped. In this Texas race, senior Republican leaders openly admitted that far too many of their own voters simply stayed home. They didn't show up even with Trump personally urging them to vote. They just didn't care enough to make the effort. This erosion of base enthusiasm connects to something NBC News polling identified back in late 2025. There are visible, measurable cracks forming within the MAGA base. The percentage of Republican voters who strongly identify as part of the MAGA movement has been declining. Strong approval ratings for Trump among his core supporters have dropped by several points over his second term. The raw intensity that once made MAGA the most powerful grassroots force in modern politics is visibly fading. And this Texas loss doesn't exist in isolation. It connects to the broader narrative of slipping control that has been building throughout Trump's second term. The courts have been striking down his major policies left and right. The Supreme Court killed his entire tariff regime. Federal judges have permanently blocked his election executive order. His own judicial appointees have held his federal agencies in contempt. And now, on top of all those institutional and legal defeats, actual voters in one of the reddest parts of one of the reddest states are sending an unmistakable message through the ballot box that MAGA is simply not the unstoppable juggernaut Trump keeps pretending it is. The strongman image is cracking. The aura of political invincibility is dissolving in real time. And you can see that dissolution most clearly in how Trump himself reacted to this loss. A truly confident, dominant political leader doesn't frantically run away from his own endorsement the instant the candidate loses. A leader who believes in his movement's strength doesn't nervously dismiss a 30-point swing against his party as some insignificant local race that has nothing to do with him. But that's exactly what Trump did. Because he knows what this loss really means. He knows his endorsement power is collapsing. He knows his ability to drive base turnout through sheer force of personality is evaporating. He knows the MAGA magic is fading. And the 2026 midterms are now less than a year and a half away. If Republicans can't figure out how to reverse these trends and figure it out fast, they're heading straight for exactly the kind of massive electoral catastrophe that this Texas bloodbath just previewed for the entire country to witness. Trump can dismiss it as a local race all he wants. But everyone watching, especially the Republican candidates who will have to run in genuinely competitive districts next November, knows exactly what this result really means. The MAGA magic is fading fast. The Strongman Act is losing its grip on the very voters it needs most. And ordinary Americans, including Republican voters who used to show up reliably every single time Trump asked, are starting to notice the cracks in ways that are now showing up exactly where it matters most, at the actual ballot box on actual election day. That's what happened in Texas, and that's why this result is going to keep Republicans up at night for a very long time.